starting on page 537 in your workbook. I can understand that a statistical question anticipates a variety of responses. Statistics involves collecting, organizing, and interpreting pieces of information or data. Let's highlight that vocab word. One way to collect data is by asking statistical questions. A statistical question is a question that is answered by collecting data. Answers to a statistical question will vary based on the data collected. That's another vocab word, so let's highlight. And an important word here is vary. So the data will vary. Let's look at some examples. The table gives us some examples of statistical questions and examples that are not statistical questions. So let's look at a few statistical questions. How many text messages do middle school students typically send each day? How many hours per night does a typical teenager spend watching television? You can see that if you ask those questions, you would get a variety of responses. So that is how the data collected will vary. Non-statistical. What is the height and feet of the tallest mountain in Colorado? That is a non-statistical question because it has a single response. We want to collect data that varies. The next question, how many people attended last night's jazz concert? Again, that is only asking a question that gives a simple response. In the table, the questions on the left are statistical questions because if you were to survey a group of students, you will likely get a variety of responses. So let's highlight statistical questions, variety of responses. The questions on the right side are not statistical because each question has one specific response. All right, we're going to look over here, talk about it. Why is how many people attended last night's jazz concert not a statistical question? How can you rewrite the question so it is a statistical question? Well, it only asked for a single response. So that's why it's not a statistical question. So if we could think about how we could ask that question to open it up to gather data that varies, we've now made it a statistical question. So let's think about something else that could be related to maybe the jazz concert. Maybe it isn't about how many people attended. How about how early do people arrive? Before an event begins. I'm sure you would get a variety of answers for that kind of question. Some people will say, well, gosh, we better get there 30 minutes early to find a good parking spot so that way it's not congested when we get there. Some people like to slide in at the last minute so they're not waiting a long time once they're inside the facility. So maybe they'll give you an answer like 15 minutes before the show starts. So this question opens it up to collecting data that varies. Go ahead and flip your paper. We're going to write some notes off to the side here in these margins. Example 1, identify statistical questions. Determine whether or not each question is statistical. How many states are there in the United States? Since this only asks for a single answer, it is non-statistical. So we're going to write a single answer off to the side. The next question, how many states has the typical middle school student visited? Well, this is a statistical question because it does anticipate a variety of responses. So let's highlight that question because it is statistical. Variety of responses. We can highlight that. But off to the side, we're still going to make a note. Variety in answers. That's what we are looking for. In what year did Alaska become a state? That is not statistical because you can only anticipate a single response. An exact answer. We'll put or exact answer. How many states has the typical adult in your neighborhood lived? This is a statistical question because we're anticipating a variety of responses. So let's highlight. Let's do a quick check. So I want you to pause the video and determine whether each of these is statistical or not statistical. I'm going to continue with the video, unpause to check your answers. What is the height of the tallest roller coaster in the world? Not statistical. Because that is a single answer. How many roller coasters are typically found in an amusement park? Because there are amusement parks all over the world, and they would probably have different amounts of rides, we could say that is a statistical question. And we will say the answers vary. On average, how many roller coasters does the typical middle school student ride each summer? We would say that's statistical because maybe some people have not ridden on roller coasters. Maybe they don't like them. Maybe it's someone else's favorite thing to do, so they've ridden a lot of roller coasters. So statistical answers vary. And what year was the tallest roller coaster built? That's not statistical. It has, we'll put an exact answer. Flip to the next page. Display data in a table. A survey is one way to collect data to answer a statistical question. Let's highlight that. Once the data are collected, you can record the results in an organized way, such as a table, and then analyze the results. So organized, so you can analyze. Suppose a random group of adults were asked the question, how many hours do you exercise each week? The results are shown in the table below. Number of hours, number of responses. This says one person responds 0 hours, 2 people said 1 hour, 5 people said 2 hours, 5 people said 3 hours. This is how we read the table. Based on the results in the table, one observation you can make is that more than half of the people who responded exercised for fewer than 4 hours. We can show it right here. Here's 4 hours and less, and all of the people that make up 4 hours or less. So that would be, let's see, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 people exercise for 4 hours or less. There's only 3 people that exercise for more. Displaying data in a table. Suppose you want to answer the statistical question, How many hours per week does the typical 6th grade math student study? Let's highlight that question. It's a great statistical question. You may survey students in your math class using the question. How many hours do you typically spend studying each week? The responses were, we're going to use these responses to put in our table. Organize the data in a table, then you're going to analyze the results. Complete the table by recording the number of responses below. So what we're going to do is cross them off and put it in the table. So how many spent 1 hour? Go through your table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students. Oops, you can't see that. I'll scoot it back down. I'm getting the numbers from up here. So 5 people said 1 hour. So I put a 5. How many said 2 hours? I'm going to find it up here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're just going to go down the line. 2 people said 3. 4 people said 4 hours. 2 people said 5 hours. And 1 person said 6 hours. So now we're going to analyze. We're going to write it off to the side over here. In the talk about it, it says, what are some other observations you can make about the data in this table? Well, we can give the mode of the table. So what did most people respond with? Well, the highest number in the table, 5 people responded 1 hours. So we can write the mode is 1 hour. Is there anything else that we could say about the data? We could say only one person responded with 6 hours. We could try to find the middle of this data set. Let's see, there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 total observations. Why don't we write that down? 18 observations or people surveyed. So half of 18 is going to be 9. Well, 9 responses are right here. 9 people only studied between 1 and 2 hours. So here's, let's see, 8, 9, 10, 11 people studied for 3 or more hours. Let's flip to the next page. Analyze the results. Find the total number of students surveyed. So we just did this on the front. Here's the numbers repeated back here. We added those and found that there were 18 people surveyed. We're going to try to summarize the data. We're going to rewrite some of the information over here about other observations. So we're going to repeat that most students studied for 1 hour. Study the responses to determine if there's an overall trend. One observation you can make is that half of the students in the survey studied for fewer than 3 hours per week. Let's move down a little bit. Suppose you want to answer the statistical question, how many times does the typical middle school student exercise each month? You survey your friends using the question. Here are the responses. Let's organize the data into the table given below. So just like we did last time, fewer than 4. Well, that would be 3, 2, or 1. So there are 4 responses that are numbers 3, 2, 1, or 0. Numbers between 4 and 7, there's 4 of those. Between 8 and 11, there's only one of those. And 12 or more, there are two numbers that are 12 or more. Let's read the multiple choice question and use the table to answer. Select the statement that best represents the data. Most students surveyed typically exercise at least 8 times each month. Well, let's look. Here's between 8 to 11 times. Only one person responded, so that's not it. Most students surveyed typically exercise more than 7 times each month. Well, here's between 4 and 7, so more than that. There's 7. That's not it. Most students surveyed typically exercise 7 or fewer times. Well, 7 or less. There's 8 here in comparison to this one up here, which if we included this, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is still less than this. So I'm going to read D, but I'm thinking the answer is going to be C. Exactly half of the students surveyed typically exercise 4 or more times each month. Okay, again, if we look at 4 or more, that's similar to this question up here, which is at 7. So we can cross that one out as well. That's the end of the notes. Now you can start your practice page on 541.